I had multiple addiction. As humans, we're animals. Like, that vulnerability could kill you.
There's that experience where people are like, oh, no, I would never touch that. Either I had a bad trip.
We're not taught typically to share. We're taught to win.
Welcome to the Sinclair podcast, where we share real-world experiences, wisdom, and the honest struggles of entrepreneurs to help you navigate and scale your business with confidence.
Kathleen, thank you for joining me today. This is something I've been really excited about. You and I go back, 12 years? Am I close on that?
Yeah, maybe even longer. I was thinking maybe 2010, but we had a little break. So 2010, break 2012, so 12 years.
Okay, we don't count those days, those years. So you and I have been working together, I'll say on a professional level for more than a decade. I reference you a lot in my life with friends and colleagues and coworkers. I mean, you're my girl. You're my coach, my counselor, my therapist. I have like a whole bunch of titles for you, but I mean, you are one of very few people, or one of, I will say, several people that have been just a huge impact on me personally, professionally, helped me through some of the best and some of the most challenging times, and I am indebted to you forever. I love you for it. I appreciate all you've done, and I'm so excited to have you on today because I get the pleasure of sharing you with the world, those that don't know you, and some of the work you're doing, some of the work we've done together, and I'm really excited about that, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Chris. That's a pretty long title to live up to, and I hope to deliver,
I rehearsed it all morning.
Well, I am very fond of you, and how you've shown up in the world has been a pretty remarkable thing to witness and to be a part of. So thank you for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. As I say, everyone needs a good coach or multiple coaches, so I have to practice what I preach.
Yes, and I am excited where this is going to go today. So,
me too. Mm-hmm. Let's get right into it. Your title is an integration coach. What does that mean? What is an integration coach?
Yeah, that's so it's a title that I brought together with the work that I do with psychedelics, and not all the work that I do is with psychedelics. So breaking down the word integration, I think when we use the word integration, my translation of that word is the act of healing and bringing all of our experiences together. So through the work with psychedelics, the integration coach is somebody that is gleaning and helping make sense or meaning of what people have experienced in either their microdosing experiences or in a full psychedelic trip. So it would happen post-journey, and then helping people use the richness of a psychedelic experience into and integrate and to bring alive within themselves and into their lives. For the purposes of not using psychedelics, I think integration is that healing component where we're bringing our past and some of our future goals into the present so that they are, again, alive in us in a way that we can live purposeful, meaningful, and integrated selves, the person that we're meant to be.
That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start, what got you into this?
Into coaching?
I want to even let's start with what got you into doing the psychedelics work?
Oh, it's a lot of my work, honestly, has been through my own personal development and through my own journeys. And journey meaning like life and parenthood and relationships and healing through past trauma. And one of the things that I was faced with in 2016 was that I had multiple addictions and things that were pretty, they're called gray area addictions. So none of them were really interfering with my ability to work or to socialize, but they were definitely consistent behaviors that I did every day. And alcohol and food were my main addictions, and I had the opportunity to learn how that was affecting my brain and my life, and decided that those were things that I could eliminate. And through coaching and work with a very specific program. What I didn't know is that those things that I was using were coping tools, even though they were addictions. They were helping me cope with things that I hadn't actually faced in my life. And when I removed the addiction, I was faced with a lot of anxiety, I would describe it as an existential crisis, things that I hadn't really had access to within myself, mostly emotions and memories, just came flooding in. And I knew I needed to continue to do the work, but I needed it to slow down. I needed to be able to process it in a way that wasn't going to be too overwhelming. And I had read that psychedelics, it's kind of contrary to what people believe, but what psychedelics do is actually slow things down. The default mode network backs off, and the ability to process information comes in more slowly. So I started to microdose in order to keep myself from feeling untethered, out of control, really overwhelmed. And with everything slowing down, I was able to then see my life sort of piece by piece and rebuild as it was, unfolding, as the addiction was, as I was overcoming the addiction, I was overcoming a lot of my own fears and pain. And then I was rebuilding with more sense of purpose and meaning. So that happened in 2016, and I didn't start facilitating with psychedelics until 2018. I started most talking about it because it was pretty underground. We couldn't really have open conversations too much then. It's much more mainstream now. But those were the conversations that I was having with people that were really asking for more insight into themselves, so that they were able to, a lot of my clients are high functioning, very successful in their businesses, but looking for a way to connect to their success, or a way to connect to themselves. And sadly, I think we live in this fast-paced world, and we're not taught that the way to find ourselves at our best is to slow down. Mm-hmm. And psychedelics thankfully do that. So we're able to make better choices and to live more, I would say, more in the present.
Yeah, it's amazing work, and I think there's a couple things you mentioned is just at that time, 2018, it really, it wasn't accepted at all, or wasn't even talked about for the most part. Fast forward 6 years, I think we're a lot further ahead, but there's still this massive stigma around the use of psychedelics and just this category of drugs. And I find it fascinating because I can literally walk down to the corner store and buy cigarettes, and I can go to the LCBO and get a 40 of alcohol, and there's so much social acceptance to these things that are a norm to the society. But some of these other tools, which are proven to have less harm on self, on others, on society, and can be these incredible tools to help people get through trauma, PTSD, addiction, there's still this massive stigma. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the stigma, it has been over decades, actually. A lot of the psychedelic research happened in the 60s, 50s and 60s. And what they were seeing is that there was a lot of success, but it was also the problem was that it was giving people a sense of connection or meaning and belonging. And that, unfortunately, at that time in the U.S., interfered with having people enroll in military, specifically for the Vietnam War. And people were choosing to be more peaceful and sort of rebelling against these government organized war, and they wanted to not have people engaging in peace rallies. So because the psychedelics connects people to themselves and to others, this was interfering with control. And so in order to control people, we have to create fear. And so what happened was that Timothy Leary, who had kind of taken LSD to the streets, he was a Harvard professor and is famous for his role in bringing psychedelics into the mainstream back then, was considered the world's most dangerous person. And because people had sort of decided for themselves that they didn't want to support what the government was doing, the government then created an enormous amount of propaganda to really bring these drugs into kind of into the shadows, where they were then Schedule I drugs. They were then completely illegal. They were seen as something that was going to make people go crazy. And the people that they were actually doing most of the experiments with were psychiatric patients, and those patients were having success in their lives for the first time. So it was this double-edged sword where there was success, but there was also fear, and then the government just turned it around and made it they called it the war on drugs. Later,
that was Nixon, the war on drugs, right?
Yeah. So later it just bred more and more and more fear. And there was other iterations of the war on drugs, which was definitely to the prison pipeline, where a lot of the people that were using drugs it was a racial issue, and Black people were stigmatized for being drug users or drug dealers, where there's no evidence that that's true. So repeatedly we've been fed all of this propaganda that serves very, very few people, and mostly just keeps people in the dark about what actually does work. And so it's been decades now, and a lot of this stuff, especially our parents and even the generations not that much after them, have huge fear around drugs. So that we're not out of those generations. We're just moving into something where people are able to actually have more ability to critical think and ask questions and see what is happening. And I think it's better for everyone. It's not the answer, but at least it's not the biggest problem with drugs.
For sure. I appreciate you going back and explaining that. When you look at the patterns and how it's done, I mean, it's crazy to think. I mean, we've made good progress, but I think still so far behind. But speaking of that, do you see sort of an exponential growth in acceptance? I mean, for example, psilocybin. You can walk down to St. Paul Street in St. Catharines and walk into a psilocybin store. They've got 8 locations in Ontario and access psilocybin, DMT, 5-MeO. I think it's decriminalized. But are we moving fast enough and going in the right direction?
I don't know. I think that, like, if we look at how cannabis was legalized, I don't know that that's really made that much of a difference. Honestly, there was an underground, and now there's like above ground. Like, there are ways to get cannabis, but I don't see that it has shifted anything. And I think that it'll create a 2-tier system the same way it did before. Having access doesn't mean that people have education. And I do think that part of the fear is that they're powerful drugs. There can be fear. There should be fear. There should be used with great responsibility. So those are the types of things that, if it went fully legalized, where then it was a medical treatment, we're looking at the same type of system that we have with people getting a hip replacement. Like, there's lots of red tape. There's lots of ways people have to just wait for their care. So we don't have a perfect health system. If psychedelics were available that way, it wouldn't be perfect. It would there's a bottleneck of need, and mental health is really in a crisis for most of Ontario. Like, there's not enough crisis beds or treatment for people with mental health. So this could be, if it was delivered in a way that was, I feel, where people are self-educating, people are talking about it, people are accessing good quality products, where there's a lot of stuff that is self-administered rather than, relying on other people or other sources to do our work. I think there is a way that we can build within ourselves the resources and the ability to use this responsibly. And I think that's through harm reduction and through education and through safe use. So I don't think that it's coming through, the government or the underground systems. I think it actually has to come through ourselves. And it is helpful that we have the ability to source it. But again, I don't know, it's still coming from a stranger on St. Paul Street. So should it be more regulated? I don't know. There's a lot of questions there, not too many answers.
When you talk about information and just, if someone says, well, I have no idea what I'm talking about, excuse me, where do I start learning? I mean, I go back to a book I read, which then the documentary came out, several years later, but Michael Pollan's book on, is it called How to Change Your Mind? Mm-hmm. And I mean, that was, pre any work I did in psychedelics. Reading that book was really, really impactful, and it touched on a lot of the history you talked about, the why, the power, the stigmas, and just how this stuff it was literally blocked and hidden from history. And then the Netflix documentary, I think, was, again, a really good piece to introduce 4 types and the power and benefits and risk to some of these. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about Michael Pollan, or how that has maybe helped introduce this to the world?
Yeah, that was definitely kind of, they call it the third wave, where people were, like Michael Pollan, he was a skeptic. He didn't really have any history with psychedelics. He didn't really, he wasn't going in trying to prove something. So I think that it is a good intro. It's definitely good because of his history with what he does with research, and all of his work, I think, has been well respected. And so it is a good place to look to that work and to know what he's talking about. And it would definitely be convincing, like it was something that I read and felt really good about, and that you read and felt good about. The one thing I think that there's some criticism around is that people then, hope that it's the cure or the thing that's going to change the world. And what has come from that is that a lot of people are just being somewhat reckless with either their drug use, or they're being reckless with their professional lives facilitating drug use. So it's really opened up the demand. And there are some universities in the U.S., and actually U of T has been doing a lot of research around the use of psilocybin. So the information is there, but the work to do it well is not. So the problem with it becoming mainstream is that mainstream isn't really prepared, and there are things that are happening that are not helping people. So the research that I think that people can do is where they find good sources of information. Double Blind is a good publication. They have a social media presence. The Psychedelics Today is 2, kind of guys that just got on. They were psychotherapists, and they got into sort of the more medicinal use, the more therapeutic use. They have, I did training with them years ago. Carl Hart is a good person to look to. He's a researcher that also was skeptical with psychedelic use, and is also representing a lot of the war on drugs and the race issue around drug use. So those are leaders Imperial College in the in the UK has a lot of research going on. They've been doing work for many years, actually. One of the things that you touched on, which is that the substances that we can just go out and buy at Sobeys are, higher risk to most people than these drugs. And David Nutt, he did a study where the drugs that have the greatest impact on person or others are alcohol and cigarettes and tobacco. These drugs are on the very, very, very bottom of the list for impact on self and others. And the rate of addiction for these drugs is also very low, because your body tends to build a tolerance. And most people, what the drugs do not want to continue to feel or experience, because it's not always
I'll go
pleasant.
back and do that tomorrow.
It doesn't give you, it takes more than it gives, and then you have to actually, do the work to put yourself back together. So they have a very low misuse. So that, I think, is something that we have to consider, that people need to know that what they're doing and how to do it, because even though you can harm yourself with overuse, you can't overdose. But the good thing about taking too much is that it'll be over in 6 hours if you can.
Yeah, for sure. Funny, early experience is probably high school and then into college, and shrooms. It was one of those. Once in a while, I'll try it with friends, and there's that experience where people are like, "Oh no, I would never touch that." Either I had a bad trip, it's often called, or I saw my friend have a bad trip. Tell me about that, because I think that scares a lot of people away from the work. And we'll talk about bad trip, then also talk about this term used often in this world, which is set and setting, and how important that is in the work.
Oh yeah, well, let's talk about set and setting, and then the bad trips.
Bad trips.
Yeah, because set and setting really is what, your state of mind and where and who you do it with. The third component to that is how much you do. My first love with psychedelics was microdosing, which is with LSD, it's a very, very low dose, and with psilocybin, it's about 1/10 of a dose. So the LSD molecule is much smaller than the psilocybin molecule, so you take a lot less of a microdose for LSD. Anyways, so the use around these drugs can be effective in very low doses. I think one of the problems when people are engaging in a community where maybe they're doing a psychedelic retreat or something that they want, like a big experience, then they're going to have a larger dose. So even if it is a set and setting situation where they're in the right mindset and they're in the right setting, they may have a too big of a dose. And in my experience, those doses really they dysregulate people, and they can't really recover or take the kind of squeeze the juice of that experience, because it's just too much. We are still just humans in a human body with human experiences. We can't process big, big, big things. So I prefer slow and low. Even if you have to do 2 or 3 smaller doses to work your way up to a bigger dose, a therapeutic dose is 2.5 to 3.5 grams of mushrooms. 1 tab of LSD would be enough for a therapeutic dose. 100 milligrams of MDMA is enough for a starting dose for therapeutic purposes. A 100 milligram dose of MDMA plus a 100 milligram bump could be a therapeutic dose. All of these are just through my own experiences. I'm not recommending anything for anyone to do. You have to kind of decide on your own, or talk to somebody who knows what they're doing to decide what's best for you. But that information is critical for getting yourself to the place where you can be comfortable in the experience. If anything messes up in the set, which is you're going into it thinking, I just, ruined my life with some type of bad experience, I am with friends that I don't trust, and I'm going to do an enormous amount of drugs. that's going to produce not great outcomes. It's
Sounds like
just
a
not.
bad idea, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, even if somebody is saying, I want to have a good experience, but I'm in a bad place, like I would say it's kind of a crapshoot if it's going to happen.
Yeah, there's so much risk to doing that.
Yeah, and people could also be in what they think is a good place with the right people and the right amount and have a bad trip. In that, and I have been, I wouldn't ever say that I've had a bad trip, but I can definitely say that I've had intense experiences that have really, really blown me away to the point of feeling like I emotionally could have unraveled at any point. And that, for me, has been really like a powerful experience. One, I know it's going to be over. And two, what has come through it is a lot of, I would say, truth, reclamation, understanding, compassion. So even if it is a bad trip or an unpleasant experience, in my experience, it has been beneficial. If people have, been misguided in those set, setting, and dose experiences and have a bad experience, it's hard to come back from it. It's hard not to be afraid. It's hard not to have some panic or anxiety around it, because, the component of being safe is really important for humans. And those unsettling experiences can be really unsafe.
Yeah, and it's, knowing we were going to have this conversation, there was a part of me that's like, I don't know if I want to talk about this, because then I have to oust myself and say, yes, I'm Chris, I do drugs, and I've experimented with many or most of what you've talked about today. And I think, a couple things that resonate for me is one, I mean, by no means, in the past, maybe some have been used as more pleasure or entertainment in a naive way, but I call this work, and it is, like you said, it can be painful. It's healing past trauma. It's emotional. It's really, really, it can be heavy. It can be uplifting as well. But I think people need to understand that, yes, I mean, if you want to move the needle and get through difficult things in life, it requires that work. And to me, this is one of those examples. And you also mentioned this being a tool. And I think that's the piece that I probably had some sort of ideas that I'm going to do this and then it's going to be all better, or I'll fix this. But, this is one of many tools that, in addition, for me, it's been, it's therapy, health, working out, the right foods. This is one of many tools that I'm using to help, get through past issues or challenges I've had and experience the best life that I can. Can you touch on that and how that can impact use or potentially get people more comfortable with the idea of this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to say, like, if somebody is doing this as a life-changing experience, it's just like a little bit of our banter pre-recording was about what people do in order to change their lives. Like, they want some sort of transformation, and they want a promise to be healed and whole. Like anything I have had an experience where I went to a Catholic church. I'm not Catholic. In a place called Herzegovina. And I had a spiritual moment. I walked into a church and something resonated. And for that moment, I felt really supported in a decision that I was making. And so I think what we need to know is that our ability to heal is within us, and the tools that we find are available everywhere. I think nature is the greatest healer, and we spend more time in our cars than, with our feet on the grass. So the tools, I think that's it can be anything, and it's what we're looking for within ourselves that needs to be the fuel or the strength, rather than looking to something or someone to do what we want to have within ourselves to be better. Like we are constant, I feel there's such a drive to outsource our power and to look for something that is going to cure or fix us. When really, no matter what, if it's money, or not, like we have to be the person that is in the driver's seat of our life. And the reason why I mention money, because I think a lot of people feel like they have to have like a ton of financial resources in order to access all these things so that they can be better, or they need money in order to be better, or they have to reach a certain level of success to finally deserve these, this feeling of confidence or well-being. And it's just, it feels to me like something we forget, which is that our birthright is to be well, and our wellness is to be found through tapping into helpful people and helpful conversations, but mostly just like really figuring out what resonates with us and within us so that we can do more of that. So
yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, it could be psychedelics or it may not, and the opportunity, I think, is just, it's everywhere, if we're looking.
Yeah, really well said. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You specifically, I want to go back to your work and talk a little bit about your clientele. You've kind of landed your ICP, or sort of ideal client tends to be a male entrepreneur. Why?
Yeah, that's a good question. It seemed that there were a lot of clients that I was working with at the time, and the longest standing clients that I've had are that profile. So, which is decades, and those clients, I think, for me, it's almost embarrassing, but there's a simplicity.
Fair. No offense at all in that.
Yeah,
I get it.
Like men are not that complicated, and the one thing that I find is that's really sad and unfortunate in this kind of capitalist patriarchy is that men are taught not to feel, and that experience of being successfully driven and motivated to do really well, in a lot of people, when they do get to that gold ring, are also smart enough to know that that's not everything. So those are the people that find me at that time and have an enormous level of success with a lot of big question marks as to why what they've created in their life is not. They don't find that they have a certain type of fulfillment. So those clients, I think they talk to each other. Thank you for the referrals.
Probably some referrals in there from many of your clients.
Yeah, and that they are being honest with themselves and each other, which I think is a beautiful gift of something that you offer the world, is your vulnerability and your honesty. And I think people look to you and say, hey, what is it about you that's this other person that they may know, and business partners or husbands, like people that you see in the world that are not doing what you're doing. So I think somebody like you is the best referral and the greatest compliment, because you are living in your authenticity, your emotional well-being. Like you haven't, and I'm not saying it's because you haven't always been like this, and you had this seeking, you had this seeking and the desire within you to find a solution for that, because I think ultimately we all just want to be happy, and how that looks for you may be different from somebody else. But I think the wonderful thing about you is that it resonates. Like your work is, and your brand, you are the work. You're showing up in your day as somebody who has lived I think on both sides, to be honest, like in kind of this, in the shadows of yourself and also into the light of who you are. So
I appreciate you saying all that. I mean, I credit again so much work to what we've done together, and when I go back on early career, and I've talked about this before, just how much I was trying to be something I wasn't, hiding behind, trying this constant. It's so much more work to be something I wasn't, and it took me a long time and a lot of work to. And I think it's still a work in progress, but trying to truly just show up as me and be vulnerable. I mean, that's something I've always had, but there's even now, I think, a stigma to being vulnerable in a workplace and being open and we're taught. I mean, the generation before us, we don't cry and you don't show your emotion and you have to be the firm but fair boss. And I think there's just Brene Brown's work is some of my favorite, and just the impact of as a leader, when you show up vulnerable, you just create a space for others to do the same. And people can go, oh, shit, you mean I'm not the only one that's all screwed up and having these fears and worries and issues? Like, that's my take on it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot there. And I think, without getting too heavy into kind of the systems that keep us going, and desiring, to produce more and to feel less, are winning. Like, they're the ones that are profiting off our labor, but it really ultimately doesn't work for anyone. And the sad part is when you say to show up and to be more vulnerable, that vulnerability, like, as humans, we're animals, like, that vulnerability could kill you. Like, you could be killed with that vulnerability, with our primal nature. So it's really, really scary. And so this other option to just not be vulnerable and to not to take a risk of being wrong or having less space, like, in order to be vulnerable and let others be vulnerable, you have to take a step back. You have to actually give up some of that power, that assumed power. So, and we're not taught typically to share. We're taught to win. And it cuts off the opportunity for people to connect in a really beautiful, authentic way, because we're all just striving for this thing that actually is really unsatisfying and lonely.
True. Now, I'm trying to we're in the middle of teaching our 3-year-old how to share, and I can see why that, it's easier just to teach him how to win, because, man, he doesn't share well, but.
Yeah, nobody really wants to share.
No. True.
Yep.
We skipped over something that I think is really important back on this psychedelics piece. And, for all those that, whether it's from listening to this or just in general, have had the thought saying, like, I'm curious, I want to try. And this comes up in a ton of conversations with me and friends and colleagues and a bunch of people saying, how did you sort of get in? And I think that's one of the biggest questions. So in a safe way, how do I go and, you shared some great resources on how to educate myself, but then I need to go procure illegal drugs. Where do I start?
Right. You talk to Chris.
Talk to me.
Talk to me, and then he gives you the number, and then you talk to me. Yeah, I think it's important to know people really honestly, because we're not, drugs are illegal and not regulated, and there are dangerous things that can happen. It's absolutely true. So if you know somebody, ask them what their path was, and truly, like, I'll answer your questions. Send me an email, or read my Substack. I don't have any social media because I've been banned multiple times for having these conversations, and so, but a safe source is good. Testing is good. Testing through Dance Safe, where you can buy. Dance Safe is an organization, a nonprofit organization that supplies test kits for what you're testing for. You're not testing for the quality of drugs. You're testing for fentanyl in most cases. But some drugs that you can't test psilocybin, but you can't really, the only thing you can really go wrong with psilocybin is that it's just bad quality, because it doesn't hold any other substance if you're getting a full mushroom.
Just getting a shiitake mushroom
Yeah,
that we paid $20 for.
Yeah, that weird looking thing that tastes terrible. So talk to somebody you know, figure out who's doing what. I have had clients that have educated themselves more on places like Reddit than things that I know. There's a book called Ecstasy is Medicine. It's a really good book. It's a doctor in the US that is talking a lot about self-directed work with MDMA. Ketamine is legal. There are or have been ketamine clinics in Canada and the US. Mind Bloom is a good place to get ketamine. It is also a self-directed supply and program. I personally think that people can do this on their own. I want people to be safe in the ways that they can be in, getting illegal drugs or procuring those kinds of things. And the important work really is to do the work. If you have a therapist, if you have a coach, if you have somebody that you can talk to, personally, I would prefer if you talk to somebody that knows what they're doing rather than judging for your drug use.
Yes.
I think the work, I am trained in a process called IFS, which is internal family systems. I think psychedelic use and IFS is a good combination of therapies. The other thing I have learned is that consent is a really important, very important part of any relationship. And if you are in an altered state, consent is removed. You no longer are able to consent. So my feelings are that putting yourself in a situation with somebody that you may not share the same ideology or the same values or principles, and that information may be shared in a psychedelic trip and have some type of influence over your experience, I don't think that that's a consensual experience, even though they may be helping you. I think we can find that information, those answers within ourselves if we don't have the sort of transference or the experiences that people are sharing as professionals, guides, or psychedelic facilitators. So I am a strong advocate for doing this work on your own and having the support outside of those experiences, those psychedelic experiences, whether they be microdosing or full trip. Just really take it slow and be educated in what you're doing. And I can offer that information. There's lots of places that are free, like Reddit and Psychedelics Today, the resource that I had already shared. They have some programs. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but let me know.
It's a ton of great resources. We'll make sure we include some of those links in the show notes so people can click through and find their way, and specifically to your website and being able to talk to you if they're interested in exploring. And I would just say going deeper in life and many other ways. So
going deeper in life.
Deeper in life.
Going deep. I love that.
Deep. Yeah, exactly. What's the favorite thing about the work you're doing for you?
Oh.
Why do you do this?
Why? Oh my gosh. I feel really, really, really privileged to be a part of, even if it's a small part of people's lives in this way. Like I've been doing this since 2007. It's a long time to be, ears on people's lives. And the stories that I have heard and the courage that people carry within their own story, and like how powerful and strong and capable people are, even if they don't know it. I've had my own therapist and my own coach and my own work that I've done every year. I can't do this work without doing the work. And I do feel like when I see somebody like you, like what you've accomplished in your life, and my other clients, like they are doing a great job at exploring themselves in this world when it's so complicated and sometimes confusing and frustrating. And to see somebody keep going and to keep asking the questions and to keep finding the answers and maybe sometimes falling down and getting back up, like, it's such a gift and such a privilege. And I feel like I've had like this secret, like I have a secret stash of experiences that people have shared with me that I treasure. It's beautiful. So that's why I do it. The beauty of humans. Awesome. I love humans.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You're in the right role. Now, you shared a lot of like the highlights or some of the good stuff, but there's obviously some challenging parts. I mean, people are sharing a lot of, as a coach, therapist, whatever you want to call it, they're sharing big, heavy, confidential things. Mm-hmm. How much does that weigh on you now versus early years in your career, and how do you deal with it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there have been a lot of painful things that people have shared, and I was once called the world's greatest listener. I feel like I can really listen for. I feel like I can listen with like all my senses, and I have a really strong gut for things. And there have been times when I knew people maybe didn't ever feel safe to share the things that they shared, or there may have been things that they never felt they could share, that they have shared, and they're really painful. And to just honor that as theirs, like the boundary and the domain of what's mine and what's theirs is really, it has to be clear. And it wasn't always like that. My background is social work, and definitely I wasn't trained to, boundaries are somewhat new. Talking about boundaries, and maybe I'm not sure why, obviously Brené Brown does the work that she does because of the need for it.
Yeah.
And so how do I think the bottom line is that I have to believe that people are capable, even if they don't believe it. There has to be some feeling within me that believes that they're capable of doing the thing that they need to do in order to get themselves through it. And I do, because I've seen it. And not everybody's a success story. But the people that have stuck with it, I think their lives have improved. And, I don't even know that it's because of the conversations or the work that we did. But I do think that somewhere along the way, just like things that you've done in many, many arenas have brought you to this place. It's not just one thing, it's many things. So, yeah, listening. I think one of the things that we just underestimate is our ability to listen and just be present for someone.
Yeah, and I think creating, not only that safe spot and confidential, but someone, like you said, sometimes there's just moments where you and I get on the call and it's like, I just need to vent, or I need to share this, or this is something that I need to bounce an idea off. And you've always created that safe spot. And I think that's what any great coach or therapist will do, is just create a really safe, comfortable, and confidential environment, and also I think to give that critical feedback, and I'll say like call me out on my bullshit, and that's something you've done really well. I'm over years I've hired you not just to be there in my corner as my supporter, but someone to call me out, and I've had you, and I've had my EO form group, now sort of a row group, but that group that like they care so deeply. Mm-hmm. And they want the best for you, but they'll also very quickly say, no, that's not it, or you're not being true to you. And I think that's the power of finding someone and putting the time in. And I think one of the things that I hear often is with people that have done therapy and are going back to it, or that haven't done it, they're like, I don't feel comfortable in sharing this stuff to a stranger. And my answer typically is, well, anyone you meet at first is going to be a stranger, but the things I'll encourage them is to make sure it's fit. Like, you have to feel comfortable after a certain amount of sessions and time with that individual and be comfortable to open and share. You have to have some sort of connection with them. And yes, if you're going to get, whether it's psychedelics, therapy, if you want to get to the root cause and get on the other side of some of the big challenges that have held you back in areas in your life, it's going to be really fucking hard work. And that's just it. They don't call it work for nothing. And I get the other side, because it's really hard to go back and again, I consider myself, I've had my own versions of my trauma and things that I've dealt with, and there's so much more severity and bigger challenges. I'm super privileged and so lucky in many areas of life, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be work. And if you want to get on the other side of it, and if you want to work through some of it, it's going to take painful moments, lots of opening, and probably multiple tools to get there. And I mean, this, to me, I guess the last point would be, it's like the gym, or it's like eating healthy. Like, you can't just go to a few sessions and feel better. And I think that's the other thing that I see happen. And I get there's resources. I mean, not everyone can afford, not everyone has benefits, but for those that are able to, you can't go to 3 sessions, feel good, and be like, okay, that's it, I'm done. Like, thanks, Kathleen, that was awesome, I'm good. Because I think what happens is, you're at a -5 in life out of a -10, +10, and you get to a 1, and it feels like a 10. You're like, fuck, I'm so good now. I can move on. But there's so much more work that can be done. And my last piece would be, some of my most favorite sessions with you are not saying, Kathleen, holy crap, I have all these big things that I want to work through. It's just saying, taking a moment of gratitude and saying, like, holy crap, look at how far we've come. Here's the things I'm excited about. Like, I'm celebrating with you, and you're there to experience the really good highs, not just the dark and the challenging and the big stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a perfect note to end on, because honestly, when you asked about those gut-wrenching moments, it's also the gift of the beauty of the celebrations. Like,
yeah.
When I met you, you were a lot younger and much more single. And
very single.
Yeah.
No gray.
You've had life has brought you beautiful moments that I get to hear about.
Yeah.
So even that gives me like goosebumps just thinking about the opportunity to have that type of relationship, and somebody's like historically, like where you were and now where you are and where you go. I don't know.
We have a lot of work to do still. Don't worry.
Oh yeah.
You're like a guaranteed job with me until you fire me. Or
when I retire.
Yeah, exactly. You
or
can't
when
retire.
You retire.
Yeah, exactly. We have a lot of work to do. I'll leave it at that.
Or when the children retire.
Yes, so true.
So it is like every part of it, the balance, the beauty of life and the balance of all of it. And I think you really wonderfully said, like, there's so many people that just want to feel better, and they can't really. I feel like we do have this yin and yang. We have this light and dark. We have this the pleasure and the pain. Like, we're just constantly walking through this fine balance. And I feel it's a really important thing to just name, and it doesn't make us better or worse because we have it. It just has to be acknowledged that it's there, and to keep going. We're not just going to get out of a good feeling and then keep having that good feeling happen unless we nurture our growth, our integration, our humanness.
I say it many times. Everyone's looking for love and connection, whether that's with self or with others, or a combo of both. And I think I can tell you that the work you do has helped me in all those areas, and I get to say a huge thank you because I appreciate you so much. I love you. I would not be where I am today without a lot of the work that we've done. So I appreciate
thank you,
it.
Chris. Thank you.
Well, thanks again for coming on. What we'll do is we'll include a bunch of the show notes, a link to your site, and I encourage anyone who wants to explore is to do the research, reach out to you. and start to at least get curious, I would say, on some other tools that if they haven't used them, how that might help them just with all areas of life and growing and evolving and just being a better version of themselves.
Yeah, we all benefit from that.
Damn right.
Good job.
Thanks, Kathleen.
You're the best, Chris. You're welcome.
You're the best.